Hello, everyone. Greetings and welcome to today's Venezuela Solidarity Network webinar and monthly online picket. It is my pleasure to welcome you here today. Before we go any further, up on the screen, you will see instructions for how to join the interpretation system. If you know how to do that already, you can see that it is active. To join, you can participate in either English or Spanish, and you can see the options for how to join down at the bottom. As you can see on the screen, you are looking for the globe symbol or the flag symbol, either on your phone under the three dots or in the screen. We'll leave that there a minute while we get set up. The chat is open if you'd like to post in the chat where you're joining us from here today. All right. Thank you, everyone. If you have additional questions, feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat regarding translation. Welcome again to the Venezuela Solidarity Network's monthly webinar and online picket, talking about our role as people in North America to fight against US-Canada sanctions on Venezuela and intervention in Venezuela by learning and exchanging with Venezuelan voices alongside voices from people here in the United States, Canada, and beyond. This month's action is hosted by a member group of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, the Alliance for Global Justice. Thank you to the Alliance for Global Justice for hosting, your support for this action, and for our work together in the Venezuela Solidarity Network. My name is Allison Bodine. I am the coordinator of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice, Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, and author of the book Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Venezuela from Battle of Ideas Press. First, I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Vancouver, Canada, the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As we defend Venezuela's right to self-determination, we also stand with Indigenous nations and defend their right to self-determination. Today is the second monthly of the Venezuela Solidarity Network's monthly webinar and online picket actions. For over 3 years, for 38 consecutive months, the monthly Venezuela picket actions for US-Canada Hands Off Venezuela have been organized by Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, the Venezuela Peace Committee in Winnipeg, and Just Peace Advocates here in Canada. But now the online picket actions and monthly webinars are being organized by the Venezuela Solidarity Network, a new North America-based network of organizations and individuals working to defend Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination against US government-led sanctions and attacks. Sponsoring organizations of the Venezuela Solidarity Network include the Alberto Lovera Bolivarian Circle in New York City, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC, the Alliance for Global Justice, Chicago Alba Solidarity, Code Pink, Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Canada, the International Action Center, the Louis Riel Bolivarian Circle of Toronto, the Orinoco Tribune, Task Force on the Americas, Venezuela Analysis, and Workers' World Party. We encourage you, anyone who's listening us here today, to also join in. And in the chat in a minute, we'll put a link where you can get more information about the Venezuela Solidarity Network, including our basis of unity, and fill out a form for how to join. Today, we have with us Venezuela's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for North America, Carlos Ron, and Yosmer Arellán, academic collaborator of the UN Special Rapporteur on the impact of unilateral coercive measures, Alena Douhan, for an important discussion on Venezuela's resistance to U.S. hybrid warfare, especially at this time leading up to the Venezuelan presidential election on July 28th of this year. Today, we will hear how the Venezuelan people and government have achieved remarkable economic progress and diplomatic success while they fight this cruel and criminal blockade and sanctions imposed by the United States, but also supported by countries such as Canada and the European Union. Since affirming its right to self-determination, Venezuela's Bolivarian revolution has been the target of U.S. imperial power and persistent regime change attempts. As Venezuela prepares for its July 28th presidential elections, it continues to confront hybrid warfare aimed at overturning the popular will and undermining its democracy, coup attempts, assassination plots, and economic strangulation under the U.S. blockade. Today, we'll hear direct from people organizing in Venezuela, important voices in this fight back against the U.S. blockade. I also look forward to hearing from William Kamikaro with the Alliance for Global Justice, who will give us a report from an action that took place yesterday at the United States mission to the United Nations in New York City, where they brought a petition condemning the attacks against President Maduro's life and assassination attempts. Without further ado, I'll just explain very briefly the program. We're going to have our two Venezuelan speakers, then hear a report from William Kamikaro. Then there'll be some announcements where we can prepare our questions. There's time for a Q&A, some reminders, and then, as usual, as been the tradition of these online picket actions, we will have time and opportunity for a group photo. Again, I appreciate folks joining us this afternoon from wherever you're joining. If you're just joining and listening to me now, reminder that there is translation available, and I will go ahead and introduce our first speaker. The first speaker today is Yosmer Arellán. He is an academic collaborator of the UN Special Rapporteur on the impact of unilateral coercive measures, Alena Douhan. Yosmer has 25 years of experience in responsibilities and advice on economics and finances for Venezuela. He's a specialist in policy design and the execution of programs regarding credit, budget, strategic planning. He's specialized in financial risk management, project evaluation, development of mathematical and statistical risk estimation models, and more. He is the research team coordinator for the study of the impact of unilateral coercive measures, another word for blockade and sanctions, on the Venezuelan economy. And with that bio, we can definitely understand why his voice is so important as we work to understand the impact of U.S. policy in Venezuela and arm ourselves to combat it. Yosmer, thank you so much for making time to join us here today. The floor is yours.
Buenas tardes.
All right, good evening, and thank you very much. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here at this webinar, and I'd like to thank the Alliance for Global Justice and everyone who is here in this webinar, and particularly my friend and brother, Carlos Ron, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. I think I have 15 minutes, and I'll try to make good use of this. The problem is I've done 5 years of research, and I'm only going to be able to show you a little bit of this and a few other things from here. All of which goes into the knowledge that we have about the impact of unilateral coercive measures. There is a much jurisprudence in this in the world. The United States is applying this method because they know that it is not contemplated within international public law. In order to punish this, well, it's kind of strange because these are like bombs that they drop on countries, they have the same effects: migration, social breakdown. They completely disrupt the economic cycle. They provoke hunger and poverty, but they're not material bombs. So these are more measures of distortion. And I want to tell you, based on this experience of 5 years of studying this, I hope you can hear me well. This experience has provoked a lot of rage because it is such a tremendous injustice. It's an economic genocide that has impacts on the well-being of all of our society and everything that we've achieved since 1999. And it has caused setbacks because of the bombs of UCMs being dropped on our society. And people, it provokes rage and pain. So what I want to tell you, these coercive measures, for example, they have had a significant impact on rising infant mortality rates. What can that provoke but pain? That information. And so the idea of this webinar is also to say, what are we doing to escape this siege? It's a multifrontal attack. And what happens after this stage? We've withstood the storm, but now with dignity and bravery, we have withstood it and we're recovering, but on our own, of our own will. Nobody has helped us. Many countries who are allies and who enjoyed the benefits of being friends of Venezuela during our petroleum heyday. Well, I have to say, in all honesty, that they weren't really with us. So just to get down to brass tacks, I'm going to provide some context because we can't talk about the recovery. Everything's getting much better. And we have our economy growing. We have the lowest levels of inflation for 12 to 15 years and a stable exchange rate. In other words, the exchange rate with the dollar before was a big problem, but we're overcoming this. But there is a tremendous lack of knowledge about what all of this has caused. Even in Venezuela, about 4 years ago, we started doing research to explain why people do not understand the impact of unilateral coercive measures and why they blame the government for it. I'm not trying to say that the government has no responsibility in this, because there has been some inefficiency and corruption that is there. But those traditional ills of any country is nothing compared to what the United States intentionally imposed on Venezuela. So it is not right to attribute it that way. It is clear that it's more than 900 coercive measures under threats, distortions, and blockade. It is important to know that this is a complete decade of this. And there are also people who have confessed many Venezuelans are not available to this, and many people abroad that speak for themselves. For example, when Yosmer Arellán comes in and says that sanctions are like arsenic, it's poison that slowly but surely kills people. And I'm going to read some of their words, and excuse me for reading this. Woodrow Wilson said, a nation that is under boycott is ready to give up. And we apply this medicine, I don't know why he calls it medicine when it's really poison, this peaceful economic medicine. He says it's a peaceful economic measure because they're not dropping bombs on us, which is a silent killer. And we don't need to deploy forces, projectiles, and outside of the boycotted nation, but it does exert pressure within the country, which in my view, no modern nation could withstand this. He said that, and he thought nobody could withstand this, and we have withstood it. We're going to continue to withstand it, and the strength of the people is not explained as easily as someone like Woodrow Wilson might say. As our host, Allison, said, Venezuela is and the vanguard of breaking down worldwide capitalism. And Now, it seems that it's become irreversible. When we say irreversible, that means because it's been boycotted and stopped by the United States. But you could say with all certainty, in doing everything possible to do what they did, and they tried to assassinate Comandante Chavez, that's the first thing. But after that, they knew that the model was very successful and they had to stop it somehow. And so they applied the UCMs just starting a year after President Chavez died. We have the largest oil reserves in the world. And after 2014, the biggest servicing the debt that was concluded, we were able to pay off the debt to service his debt with the oil revenue that we had through 2013. And after that, there was a big drop between 2014 and 16, a 60% drop in oil prices that also complicated the situation. There are analysts and political economists who say that that Venezuela wasn't doing right. No, we're not saying that in 2013, the GDP of Venezuela was more than $200 billion. That's approximately 4 times bigger than what it was during the previous 30 years. In other words, it is an economy that was really overheating, in fact, because we had several quarters of continuous growth. And it was slowing down. It slowed down 2013 to 14, and then went up to 280 billion to 210 billion. But up till then, 210 billion is pretty high for Venezuela that was more accustomed to 60 to 80 billion GDP. So it is false to say that we did not put together a good project and that we prevented the economy from reaching a higher level. We starting with some 200 billion. This was not an economy that was bad shape. It was in bad shape when it was around 50 billion. This is to help you understand the context. It's not that we were doing things wrong or that PDVSA was not doing well. That's another lie that needs to be refuted. So the PDVSA, the oil company, we have repeatedly said, and even people in Venezuela unfortunately believe this, that PDVSA was destroyed. In fact, if that were true, and then I would ask something to the people, say that, then explain to me as if I were a 2-year-old or 4-year-old child, why is it possible then for to get down to 340,000 barrels a day? How is it possible to now we're at almost 1 million barrels? If we destroyed PDVSA and it's ruin, and because we're corrupt, inefficient, and dumb, whatever you want to accuse us of, then how is it possible for 600,000 barrels to be coming out now? What's Chevron doing here? If PDVSA, if we destroyed it because we're so inefficient and corrupt, then why has Chevron come back here a couple of years ago, getting a license from the United States to extract petroleum, and they've been contributing more than $200 billion. So all of these lies fall on their face. The Bolivarian revolution that started in 1999 obviously generated economic indicators and indicators of social well-being and social justice that had to be stopped by the US because this was going to be an example for the world. It already is, but it was going to be an even bigger example and become irreversible. That's one thing. And the other thing is that, as Bolton said in his book, Venezuela is still our backyard. And so those 600,000 barrels of oil are mine. And that I'm going to blockade it. That is how people die. They don't care what's happening in Palestine. They don't apply UCMs against Israel. It's a nefarious hypocrisy, and they are the evil of the planet. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about, is these unilateral coercive measures, or UCMs. And then I don't know how much time I have. I didn't, you have to give me a reminder when my time is almost up. But I also, somebody's asking what UCMs are, unilateral coercive measures. And I have a premise for you. I just concluded a book that's going to come out in a couple of weeks a book that I wrote with an entire team, but it includes the participation of Jorge Teresa Montserrat and Rosales, he's the secretary of ALBA. It's still getting corrected. I've got the draft here, and it's also part of this book that I've got here. It includes a lot of definitions of unilateral coercive measures, and they also could be called extortion. And it's not formally set forth in any book, but this is being tested because they are multi-dimensional. They take many forms, and you have to look at the causal nexus between the measure and the impacts. This is not always completely clear in some cases. Sometimes the U.S. prevents your neighbors from engaging in negotiations with Venezuela, and so we have all of our financial systems shut down, and we can't even buy vaccines. And so that is, the U.S. is threatening all our trading partners, and they say you can't even sell them a liter of water. So how does this work? This is called overcompliance. And there is a zero risk policy and overcompliance, which has exacerbated and expanded the impacts of the unilateral coercive measures. So I would like to go into part of the book, which is what they did to us. I'm just going to give you an example because unfortunately, I don't have enough time to explain it with scientific, academic language, everything that we put forth in the book. But I would like to talk about how I explain it in communities in Venezuela. They have a question. They always ask me, isn't it really because of corruption and government inefficiency, more that than sanctions, responsible for economic problems in Venezuela? Who is more to blame? And so, excuse me, just a second. Sorry, I had to resolve a technical issue. I'm just going to give you an example, and it is very important to be able to understand the impact of unilateral coercive measures. Imagine that, let's going to say we have a lady in Venezuela, her name's Simona. Simona is someone who has 3 health issues: diabetes, hypertension, she has high cholesterol, and she has something else, hypertension, okay? She's 60 years old, and she takes pills for all of this. She still eats a lot of junk food, and she didn't stop eating carbs, and so she is sick. And then what I want to say with this is Simone is in Venezuela, and she has these diseases as a result of her own development over the course of her life. What can we cure? Corruption, inefficiency, indolence, and lack of organization of many things. That's one thing, but the rentierism from oil, it seems like we all have like a matrix, like from the matrix, we have the rent that feeds us. We have to get rid of that and begin to do what we've been doing over the last 3 years, which is to produce our own what we need. But Simona has those 3 diseases, and she goes out into the street and she sees a ne'er-do-well there who wants to rob her and shoots her in the head. And then she goes into the ICU. So I'd like to ask all of you, how do you answer this? This is a rhetorical question. Is she in the ICU because of getting shot in the head, or because she suffers high lipids, diabetes, and hypertension? No, she went into the ICU because she got shot in the head. The bullet in the head is the sanctions. The high cholesterol, diabetes, and hypertension are the problems that we have to address. But the bullet in the head that was shot at our society and our economy, which is unjust and illegitimately imposed by the United States, caused us to go into the ICU. So there is no debate about whether it's the sanctions are more or less to blame. Obviously, if you have diabetes and hypertension, that's bad, and that makes the patient in worse shape. But the patient, Simona, had to go into the ICU because she got a bullet in the head. And so that's how I try to help people understand the impact of the UCMs. It's not because of our endogenous problems. There is corruption and indolence and all of these things. It's true in all the governments around the world. And even for oil production, it has not fallen by 80%. Coincidentally, after the UCMs, the production dropped. But oil revenues and hard currency revenues fell by 90%. So in Venezuela, how did they do this? They attacked our main source of income, which is oil, and obviously, if there is a causal nexus and the channel of transmission is very easy to determine because we are so dependent on oil. If you turn off the spigot or do things so the spigot gets cut off, then obviously it's going to affect the entire economy and the entire country. Also, if you blockade the international financial system, let's say they're going to put the little amount of money that I have because you cut off the oil, I'm going to use what little money I have to buy vaccines and other medicines. But if we don't have this, we don't have access to finance. How can I pay for these products? And then also, I can't request financing. They cut off all sources of financing for me to be able to make up for the lost production here and the drop in prices. And all countries incur debt in order to address urgent needs. But even the International Monetary Fund, in the middle of the pandemic, if you can imagine it, would give us the money that they gave to many sanctioned countries for us to face the pandemic. So this is really a crime against humanity because, in fact, and they're idiots, excuse me for saying so. If you don't give a country the resources to confront the pandemic, it's going to continue to spread. But our president managed it very well, and we managed to overcome it. And now we get on to the next point. And I'll try to be a little bit quicker. I see I have a board here. I'm not going to show it to you, but I'm looking up at my board, which where I wrote down the points I don't want to forget. Even under blockade and with the UCMs in full flower, how could we confront it? What did Venezuela do to overcome the blockade? Well, I've divided it into 3 major moments. The first one follows the timeline of the last 10 years, which is resistant. Ours as a heroic people that have been able to overcome these. And this was a tremendous drop. People didn't have money to buy anything. More than 335,000% inflation in just 1 year, and a variation in the exchange rate of tremendous levels. These are unimaginable figures that caused our purchasing power to plummet, and I might have money to pay for maintenance. All of this causes the effect to expand throughout the country. The electricity system, the water system, everything fell into disrepair. And the period of resistance included distortions. I'm sorry. That came about in the midst of all these problems. For example, there's something called bachakeo. I don't know how you say that in English, but it's the illegal sale of the prime necessities. And people got in a line to buy one little loaf of bread or a roll. They were in line for 2 to 3 hours. If there was something called Dollar Today over the internet. There was a disaster. All of this was caused by the coercive measures and the drop in revenue. What did we do? It came to the point where we had to take drastic measures, which in fact were criticized by the Venezuelan left, that's what we call them. We look at the behavior of some agents who are criticized whatever we do. That is really impressive. We have our enemy there who did all of this to cause people to suffer, to have their salaries lose value, and to suffer in multiple form. And so what people are going to do is attack the government. Why don't you attack the United States? They're the ones who imposed the measures. The fact is that this was a tremendous period of resistance and of dignity of the Venezuelan people, which must always be recognized, because the United States did everything that they did to spread discontent and get people to come out in the streets to try to bring down the legitimately elected constitutional president, Nicolás Maduro. But this did not happen. Rather, we began to transform the situation. We stopped consuming butter. Since we were such a wealthy country, we imported butter. We used, it was like a bacchanal. We were consuming all kinds of imported liquor. We began to be more careful to find other jobs and not to depend on oil revenue. We took away that little crutch, that tube that was in our necks. And then the government realized it had to be more austere, more and take bold measures. And these bold measures led us miraculously, and I even say this in my book, and Carlos Ron is familiar with this theory that I have, and I think that a virtuous formula was applied. A virtuous formula, that is, that we applied a series of measures that we really should share with the world. I write about them. We should make this available so that everybody can know what we did, what were the various medicines that we applied to reverse the effect. Now, careful, within the framework of still a very low level of revenue, but what little could we do? As the president himself said, to do a lot with very little, or to do something with nothing. We began to be more efficient. We learned that you don't waste water. We learned that you don't waste electricity. And we learned that we had to have 2 or 3 jobs to have revenue. We have to produce things at home. We have to grow our own food. And so all kinds of wonderful things occurred to us. For example, previously, there were 2 or 3 brands of corn flour. Arepas are a very important part of the Venezuelan diet, but more than 20 appeared then. And this was mostly imported. Now, almost 100% of our food is produced here. Another miraculous effect was created was entrepreneurship. People started business at home selling frozen treats, to have micro and medium-sized enterprises, and to not depend on imports. In addition, this virtuous formula came to the second major moment. First was resistance. The second, and was even more important than the last one, which is recovery, is to achieve stability. If we were not able to stabilize, then the exchange rate with the dollar and inflation, then none of the economic agents, no human being is going to invest, is going to launch a business if you have 330,000% inflation, 70-some% exchange rate. What positive expectations could investor have? Once we managed to take these measures and found the virtuous formula, and this virtuous formula must be recognized, and I have to say that here, that it was the result. At the end of the day, the one who decided on the virtuous formula was President Nicolás Maduro. Here, no matter how much that I may be recognized as the director of at the Central Bank of Venezuela. And today I'm not speaking as part of the board of directors of the Central Bank, but rather as an economic researcher. I must acknowledge that the president was the one who changed the path and turned the wheel and began to apply measures that caused inflation and the dollar exchange rate to stabilize. Once that happened, and we went into a period of stability, talking about 2+ years ago, and now we have inflation markers that are incredible. We don't have exchange controls, but we have control over the dollar. We don't have price controls, but prices are stable. So inflation is 1.2%, unheard of in Venezuela for at least the last 20 years, because all of these virtuous formulas have put a new mindset in the Venezuelan people to not depend on oil revenue. And you have to stop thinking that I don't need to use that anymore. I don't want to do that. That's irresponsible. Now look what's happening. Now I have the oil revenue here in my pocket, and now with the struggle over prices is a little bit more equitable. There's a situation of greater parity and prices stabilize. To close out, then the next major moment came. First, we had resistance, which has remained over time, and then stability that sounded in 2019 that I can't tell you about here. There are several of them, and it would take too long of a technical explanation to explain it. But then we came to the third major moment after resistance, changing our behavior, and then we took measures to stabilize the most important nominal values of the economy, and something appears which was sensible, and that was recovery. In other words, first we had the big fall, and then we began to go back up again. I'm not trying to say that we can have a victory yet. We've had 12 quarters of growth thanks to our people, our president, and our formula, and we learned to do things better. Our people are rebuilding. We are relearning. We are leaving behind things that need to be eliminated, the parasites. And I think that we have all of these periods. I saw this very much up close because I was at the central bank, and I also go out in the street and I conduct surveys. I see how we are being reborn. It is really extraordinary. That's what I was saying at the beginning. And I'd like to conclude with something very bad was done to us that we do not deserve, just because we wanted self-determination and because we had our economy growing over dozens of quarters. Then that's why they have to sanction us. They do not have the authority to impose sanctions on us. Only the UN does that. And in fact, the UN has lost some of its legitimacy. So if we look at this, and now in this new process of the last 2 to 3 years, we have managed this with dignity and bravery. With great dignity, we resisted, and with great dignity, we are moving forward. And we've also been brave because we're going to we withstood all of this, and we're going to continue to move forward with the recovery. This is very nice. And I can tell you that we feel that there is some inequality as a result of the UCMs, but we have this gap here is moving upwards. It's not the same to have the same gap, which in itself is bad. And this gap in income levels. No, here the teachers earn $3, but you have to look at the overall income that people have in Venezuela. I myself, and our measurement is around $230, which is a tremendous increase. And this is a result. And be careful. One thing I wanted to say, the private entrepreneurs also changed their logic. That's very important, because previously during the Chavez period, the private enterprise also had like a trachea tube here on the back, and they just wanted to rely on oil revenue. And they were very hostile to President Chavez and would not cooperate on any solution. So it was a bourgeois entrepreneurial class that was coup mongering, but over time they also were punished by this, and they were left without any money because the blockade and the coercive measures put an end to everything. So then they also reacted. They got rid of that dependency on oil revenue and worked with their own pockets. If they had done this before with the level of a boom that we had, and you can listen to what I'm going to say now, during the Chavez years, there's an indicator called international investment position, and that's the liquidity that all Venezuelans have in bank accounts overseas. This indicator would be around $250 billion. Now, just imagine that. That is really a huge figure. So they were extracting revenue from Venezuela, not investing it in the country. That is very unfortunate because this is a business class that is not nationalist. But now I could say that they are believing in the country, and this is bearing fruits. And the figures, I was going to show you some figures, but we don't have time. But in Venezuela, the loss in oil production, according to the latest calculations, about $228 billion. In other words, oil no longer gave $228 billion. And now this gets to go into the economy and it expands. It has a expanding positive impact. And now when we look at this impact on GDP with the production of goods and services throughout the entire country, and we see that between 2015, I don't know, between 2015 and 2023, economic losses to GDP was giving us an impressive figure, $1 trillion. So $1 trillion, to make that clear. That is what the Venezuelan economy failed to have in revenue between 2015 and 2023. That is the level of the damage imposed on our economy and our people because of the illegitimate and inhumane application of unilateral coercive measures, which are crimes against humanity. I have far more to share with you, but I think my time is up. And I think, in fact, I'm abusing your time. Thank you very much. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Yosmer. Really, it's no abuse. We are very grateful for your wealth of knowledge and experience. This is the information that we need in order to combat these unilateral coercive measures, the US blockade and sanctions that are strangling the economy of Venezuela. But as we've talked about, Venezuela is overcoming that. So interesting to hear your analysis about the diversification of the economy, how Venezuela deals with dependence on oil, just really, yeah, it was a marathon and of information, and we're really grateful for that. Don't worry, all the presentation is recorded. We'll send it out so you can listen to it again. But I already also do see folks posting in the Q&A. If you have questions in English or Spanish, feel free to post them in the question and answer box, and we'll have time. Carlos Ron generously offered, partly through Yosmer's talk, to lend some of his time to Yosmer with that important information. So no worries, we are right on schedule. So next, I want to invite Carlos Ron. Carlos Ron is Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs for North America at the Venezuelan Ministry of External Affairs and President of the Simón Bolívar Institute for Peace and Solidarity Among Peoples. As a diplomat, he was Venezuela's charge d'affaires to the United States of America from 2017 to 2018. And he's also represented Venezuela in other capacities in the US between 2014 and 2018, and in Brazil from 2010 to 2014. So Carlos, welcome today for some responses and additions to really the wealth of knowledge that we got from Yosmer.
undertaken against Venezuela is really an attack against any of Latin Americans' democracy. We saw it here in Honduras when there was a strong advance at reshaping the constitution. I mean, and you know, that was the purpose of this in the Zelaya government that later got attacked and overthrown. And we see that this reaction, you know, that has been going on for more than 15 years now against all these progressive and left-wing and revolutionary advances in Latin America is just part of this big design of how to create pain and suffering in the people of Latin America so that they would turn against those governments that are providing a new alternative, that are providing something different from what the imperialist recipe is for a region. I'm really glad that we're doing this webinar, and I'm really glad that our friend Yosmer was able to present. I know he has a lot, of course, to tell us, a lot more to tell us, because I think he has done a terrific job, and you know, proud to have him as a friend, and to see somebody that has dedicated his work precisely for this recuperation of the Venezuelan economy. Because you see, one of the things I think that we have to everything that had been positive, everything, you know, that had been achieved during the Chavez years. You know, strong education, strong indicators of nutrition, a strong housing, you know, everything that had been successful, and that gave us hope in the socialism of the 21st century. That was exactly what was attacked, and that was exactly what with you know, trying to attack both the gains of socialism, but at the same time trying to blame socialism for that disruption. And this is you know, this is really the way you see how the information is manipulated, so that people start blaming socialism for actually the you know, the attacks that predatory capitalism through sanctions is taking place. You know, we've been reflecting in the last couple of weeks about the election context from the US. You know, all know we have elections on the 28th of July. And, you know, one of the reasons that we believe our people are going to clearly remain and re-elect the Bolivarian revolution is precisely because we are, you know, we have been able to achieve in these 25 years a lot of important gains. And I'm just going to give you, you know, a number I stumbled upon the other day, which I thought was interesting for this. With regards to nutrition, for example, before 1998, or I should say at 1998, the year that President Chavez comes into office, the undernutrition levels of Venezuela was at 16.4%, which was pretty high. And these are the people, you know, that was previous to the revolution. During the revolution, in the year 2011, for example, we made that number, that level of undernourished people decrease so much that it went down to 3.1% in 2011. But I'll tell you something even more interesting. When the blockade, I mean, the maximum pressure campaign began already, you know, there were sanctions already in place, but when the maximum pressure campaign began in 2017, that rate went up to 13%. That's still below the rate before the revolution, before Chavez came into power. So that's just to say, the achievements of the revolution were so strong and so powerful in something like fighting hunger, that even with the blockade, we still had better numbers than you know, the previous administrations before President Chavez. And those people that were involved in that high undernourishment rates previous to the Bolivarian Revolution are exactly the same people that are trying to convince the Venezuelan voters now that they are going to improve the economy and they are going to do better things for the Venezuelan people than the revolution has. Yeah, I think the story of the Venezuelan Revolution, especially under the presidency of President Maduro, has been a story of resilience, but both of the leadership as well as organized people. Because I think we cannot understand, this is something I like to stress a lot, we cannot understand the extraordinary story of the Venezuelan people if we don't understand that what we have taking place right now is a combination of a leadership, a strong leadership in the state, which is actually a collective leadership out of the people that worked with President Chavez, from President Maduro to the rest of his team. This is a collective leadership with the political will to transform society, together with organized people's power, willing to be part and to execute that transformation. If we did not have both these two elements, the leadership and the organization, there cannot be any of the transformations, nor could there be any of the resistance that we have faced so far. One of the things that Yosmer always points out when we had these conversations, and I think it's also important to stress here, is that the perversity of the sanctions is in a system like Venezuela, is that it's also designed to punish the state, to punish the government by cutting off any income from the state. This is what makes it impossible for us to raise salaries in a way that would not affect inflation or would not affect the economy, or that would, or even, I mean, we don't even have enough money to give, to maintain the standards that we had prior to the dramatic loss of income. So you have two things there. You have the loss of, the problem with the loss of the high loss of income, as well as the perversity of using that to cut off the state, as well as the intention to support the private sector in a way that you can say, well, look, it's the government that doesn't work, it's socialism that doesn't work, but look how the private sector actually works. So it's a perverse system where you're actually trying to convince people that because the private sector does have some leeway and does have some capacity to grow under the sanctions regime, that is the solution, and not the state that was actually implementing measures to guarantee the diminishing of inequality and so forth. So I think this is something that we must understand, because sometimes I think that in the internal narratives in Venezuela, especially narrative promoted by some sectors of the opposition, and even some sectors on the left that have not understood well these dynamics, they have pressured, they pressure the government as if it's something that the government is not doing, while not recognizing that it's actually, the government is actually being cut off. The state of Venezuela is being cut off. The state of Venezuela is actually being robbed. I mean, we have been robbed of Citgo, for example. We have been robbed of the money that is in the Venezuelan foreign accounts. We have been robbed of the gold that is in England. We're constantly being robbed of assets that belong to the Venezuelan people and belong to the Venezuelan state, or that should be used by the Venezuelan state to provide for the Venezuelan people. So this is the perversity of this methodology of sanctions. And I must say, for the first time this year, I mean, I'm just coming back from a couple of weeks ago, we had a session at the United Nations General Assembly, when we were finally for the first time in 20 years, the General Assembly once again addressed the issue of unilateral coercive measures. And we had over 30 countries speak, and not only countries, but individual countries in their own capacity, but countries speaking on behalf of other groups of countries. And it was almost unanimous. Well, actually, you could say it was unanimous. It was a unanimous position to criticize and to reject these unilateral coercive measures, because at the end of the day, these measures, I mean, the ones that didn't reject them are the ones that implement them: the United States, the European Union, Canada, and so forth, but not the countries that have been affected. That is, about 30% of the world is affected by these measures, and and got together at the United Nations to reject them and to try to speak speak out and denounce this. I think it's important that we say this also, and when we look at issues such as migration, that has affected Venezuela also in recent years, and we have to stress, especially for our North American audience, we have to stress that migration has been the result precisely of these coercive measures, precisely of the impact, the negative impact that this has had on people, and that has forced people into economic migration. It's not political persecution, but it has been politically motivated. And because it was politically motivated, and because it was there were incentives throughout the Latin American region, but also the United States, to make people, to show that people were fleeing Venezuela. I mean, this is part of the negative image that they wanted to create on Venezuela. Then they supported this rhetoric that people are being persecuted, and they facilitated for people to come into the United States or other places under the allegations that they were being persecuted. But it was when it was really about economic migration. If it had not been about economic migration, we wouldn't be having the rates of people actually coming back to Venezuela. This is remarkable. I mean, in the last 2 or 3 years, we received over 500,000 people that have come back to Venezuela. That the government now has a program that we just inaugurated about 2 weeks ago, or actually our vice minister that was appointed 2 weeks ago for a program that was already running, where we're now receiving Venezuelans back, and we're helping them. And we're also designing a program that to help Venezuelans where they wish to stay, because we understand obviously that migration is a human right. We're not criminalizing migration, but on the other hand, we're trying to protect people from being criminalized as minors. But none of this would be taking place if they hadn't been for those measures, for those sanctions. And I say this because as we go to elections on the 28th of July, the group of people that are responsible for calling for sanctions on their own country, for calling for an invasion on their own country, for calling for violence in the streets, all these issues that made people want to leave the country are the ones that are pretending now to say, that, if they are elected over President Maduro, then Venezuelans can come back. The truth is that, their policies have been anti-Venezuelan, anti-working class since the beginning, and we have to be we have to understand this very well. It has actually been the Bolivarian Revolution that has provided for people to come back to Venezuela, that has provided to new formulas to try to stabilize the economy in the middle of these attacks. I mean, what Yosmer was describing, it's very difficult to imagine when we're not living it like we have been during the last 5 or 6 years. But it's true that there were points that we faced very difficult situations. Lack of access to everyday items that were necessary for both in food, both in healthcare and other things. And we've been progressively overcoming those difficulties, and that has been because of a steady decision of the government not to surrender, to try out whatever it needed to try out in order to guarantee that we would get, things going. And that meant a lot of trial and error, because, we didn't know how to deal with sanctions. We didn't know how to deal with the situation before. But, we eventually, I think, have found now a way to, manage and to be now living a sort of recovery. That, for example, a country with an oil economy like Venezuela that used to import, about 80% of its food, now is because of the sanctions and because of not because of the sanctions, because of the resilience of the Venezuelan people in face of the sanctions. Now it's being able to produce over 90% of what it consumes internally in food, and that is amazing. And so I saw in the chat, I don't think we have to thank the sanctions. I think we have to thank people's willingness to organize, to face challenges, and also we have to recognize a government that didn't give up, because the easiest thing would have been to privatize everything, to turn it liberal, to just give in. And there has been always a commitment from this government to maintain the path to socialism, to maintain the social guarantees that we were trying to achieve under the revolution, and that is what I believe, and why I'm convinced that we're going to win an election again on July 28th. A lot of people, specific people, have suffered because of the sanctions. Everything has, the impact that the sanctions have had, for example, in damaging our public works system, damaging the electrical system, because we can have maintenance or we can get spare parts, even garbage trucks. I mean, we couldn't get spare parts for garbage trucks, to pick up, to pick up garbage. Imagine what that creates in a country. I mean, just the fact that, garbage pickup is not normal. Of course, then they do that so that people will blame the government. As people say, "Oh, this is laziness, this is corruption, this is whatever." But it's really, creating conditions of chaos, of despair on the population. We used to have, before the blockade, we used to have this very strong. We used to be able to provide a lot of medicines for patients with specific illnesses that then became really hard to be able to purchase and to bring into the country. I mean, we used to have also I think even LGBT community has complained, for example, especially our trans community, how for example, they before they used to get hormone treatments and all these things in order for their process to take place, and how that was also blocked during the maximum pressure campaign, and they weren't able to get a hold of it. So you see how there's a way to affect the whole population, and then together with a narrative, always a negative narrative by the mainstream media, by their social media, in order to always blame the government for these conditions. But when it's really how the tentacles of the blockade is spread and hit every aspect of societal life. So I think this is it's important that we learn more, that we look more into what these processes have been and what the actual effects of the sanctions have been, because as Yosmer pointed out, no matter how many other factors were there to add in, the the level of damage that has been done by sanctions has been terrible, and it's really impacted. I mean, you had a country that in 2013 had an income of about $80 billion, go down to about $700 million in 2021. That's a huge deficit. That's about losing more than 90% of your income. And this is all due to these sanctions, and this is all due to the strategy of trying to make people turn against their own government and trying to make people turn against their own democracy. So, I think we are undergoing a new moment. I think Venezuela, the last couple of years have been years of optimism, and I think we're going to face a new moment now, where we're going to definitely we have learned to deal with these sanctions. We know they're not going to go away. I mean, I don't think I don't hope that the U.S. policy is going to miraculously completely turn and lift all sanctions, because really, the strategy both of Trump and of the Biden administration has been to keep them in place. So I think it's been very difficult to think that we, from one day to the other, we're going to have them all gone. And we have the example of Cuba, how it's been, harassed for decades. So I think that it is now learning to live with these measures, learning to be creative, and learning to find new ways, which is really where our future lies. So happy to be able to participate, and of course take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah, for adding that important perspective to Yosmer. A lot of folks, as you saw earlier in the chat, were definitely interested in today how sanctions impact the elections in different communities in Venezuela. So it's important to have that insight. I know especially some folks are here today that have been working with Venezuelan migrants living in the United States. And that's an important community to organize with here in North America, and to get involved in our work against U.S. policy in Venezuela. And it's really great to have some of you here today alongside the other activists and folks joining us from across North America. The time now, we'll make a few announcements, give Yosmer and Carlos the time to look through the Q&A box. There's a few questions there, which are some great ones, and we'll come back to that Q&A. But one of the most recent things pointed in the chat leads me to an announcement as I give William Kamakaru a heads up to get ready to speak. So the announcement I'll make is for a webinar that the Venezuela Solidarity Network has also co-sponsored, a webinar series actually, and it has to do with exactly the question, the elections upcoming in Venezuela. And that is a webinar series put on by the Orinoco Tribune and the International Manifesto Group, co-sponsored by a number of other organizations, which I will read out in a second. But it's going to be a webinar series taking place on Sunday, July 7th, and then Sunday, July 14th, featuring speakers from around North America as well, London here on this poster with Francisco Dominguez. So a really important lineup of speakers, an opportunity to learn more specifically about the upcoming elections in Venezuela. I'll put the information in the chat for how to register. If you go to the Orinoco Tribune website, you can find the link really easily, but it will also be here in the chat. I'll just share the second poster as well, webinar number 2. So this is for the one that is taking place on the 14th. Again, another great lineup of Venezuelan and North American voices, and really want to encourage people to join in that webinar series, July 7th and 14th. So that is the webinar series co-organized by the International Manifesto Group and the Orinoco Tribune, also sponsored by the Alliance for Global Justice, the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, the Geopolitical Economy Report, the Louis Riel Bolivarian Circle in Toronto, Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice, the Venezuela Solidarity Network, and Mint Press News. I'm going to put that in the chat and invite William Kamakaru to make a few remarks about an important action that took place in New York City just yesterday on June 24th. William, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Welcome. Just let me know when you want me to share the photo.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. Also, thank you very much, Carlos and Yosmer, for that excellent exposition about what's going on in Venezuela. Basically, also, I just very quickly want to mention that while Carlos was talking, I was reading the Últimas Noticias, a newspapers, Venezuelan newspaper, and President Maduro just announced that Venezuela is producing 1 million barrels of oil per day now. And I think that is a very good news and also something important. Yes, yesterday we have protest in front of the United States mission, the UN, we went, this is the third time that we organized something like that. Again, the United States mission and the United Nations. And the last test was with Ramsey Clark. And Ramsey Clark was the man that delivered the message directly to the first secretary of the United Nations, of the United States mission at the UN. He went inside to the lobby and delivered the message, a letter with a big amount of signatures in support of Venezuela. So we're trying to do the same thing this time, but everything had changed. They basically don't allow us to go inside of the lobby, and they basically put the group to walk to different places to put the letter and the mails that they would receive. And at the end, an officer said to us, just send mail, regular mail to whoever you want in the mission. So they didn't receive the letter. They didn't talk to us like in the past. So, but it's very important to do that because we were in front of the United States mission at the UN, and we were able to see that they were not very happy with us. And with all the announcement that we have and the yelling that we have in front of the building. From there, we decided to go to the Venezuelan mission that is just one block from the UN, from the USA mission. And we have encountered with Joaquin Perez, who is the deputy ambassador of Venezuela. And he received the delegation. We went to the lobby. He spoke to us for a little while, and we can share some pictures that we have with him in the lobby. It was a very nice conversation with him. The group was very exciting. Some of the people basically tried to get selfies with him. So, but yeah, that was very good encounter, and I feel like we were very successful to get more than 1,200 signatures from all over. We have people like Roger Waters signing, also people like Alfred de Saya, Atilio Boron, some big guys that really like to support Venezuela and support the letter. So we were requesting, because we were very worried, we are extremely worried about the fact that in the last 8 months, more than 6 assassination attempts have been happening against President Maduro. So that's one of the issues that we mentioned in the letter, but also our extreme awareness about the electoral process in Venezuela that's taking place this coming July 28th. And we basically said that we are very worried, but we know that this coming July 28th, Venezuelan people, the will of the Venezuelan people and the peace will win. So we will not see any disturbing against the Venezuelan, despite all the effort coming from the United States to destroy this event that will take place this coming July 28th. I just want to invite everybody in the audience to be alert with this coming electoral process that's taking place in Venezuela. It's extremely important that we denounce whatever United States wants to implement against the Bolivarian revolution in the next coming days. It's very important to denounce those elements from the opposition that are living in the United States and that openly are attacking Venezuela and the Venezuelan people. And it's very important also to go to Venezuela to show solidarity, to be connected. You go to Venezuela with media, with people here to basically inform and report back whatever happened in the country. I just want to say that and basically say again, thanks to Carlos and Yosmer, and thank you, Alison.
Thank you, William. To give people an idea of what it looked like, this is when the delegation visited, of course, not the US mission, as William explained, they were not let in, but this is the Venezuelan mission, of course. The photos of Maduro, Chavez, and Bolivar. where they were warmly greeted regarding the important petition delivery yesterday. Thank you, William, for organizing the action and leading the organizing of it. This is one of the many events of the Venezuela Solidarity Network. And again, I encourage people to join and follow the Venezuela Solidarity Network. I'm going to put in the chat the social media links where you can join us and find the ways to get involved. So thank you, everyone. Now that we've given our speakers the chance to review some of the questions, we can go ahead and get started with a question and answer period. One common thread I'm seeing through the questions, Yosmer, if you are available to speak, is regarding especially Venezuela's participation in international economic agreements. So what has been the impact, and what is happening today with agreements like ALBA or CELAC? Are these helping the relief of the US unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela? Carlos has answered a bit about BRICS, but if you have any insight you'd like to share about BRICS as well, that would be much appreciated.
Sí, gracias. Sí, claro.
Yes, thank you. Of course. We have to have a way to allude to the unilateral coercive measures, and one of the mechanisms being constructed to respond to it is the BRICS, but ALBA also right now, and in fact, I am providing providing aid to the secretary of the ALBA. And we know sometimes we have to do these things silently because there are spies everywhere, but Venezuela has to be part of this transformation of the new multipolar world. And even beyond our dreams for multipolarity, it is a need now. Because without this, the United States is going to be able to block off more and more of the world. And so we can't, they do this through the dollar, and the UCMs are going to prevent the progress of non-hegemonic financial blocks that could result in saving the planet.
Thank you.
All right.
Carlos, if there's a question you want to answer, I know you're in the middle of arriving in Honduras, so feel free to turn on your camera when you're available, but I can see you're typing in the chat, which is excellent. Oh, you are there. Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add regarding the international economic agreements?
Oh, I think it's important that, Venezuela, despite what the U.S. and the sanctions wanted to do, which was isolate Venezuela, it's been the other way around. I mean, Venezuela is very actively participating, has been participating in different sorts of integration arrangements, not only in the region, but those that that are even farther away. BRICS was an example. I mean, we're waiting to enter BRICS, and from the last ministerial meeting, there were a lot of projects that came out of how Venezuela can help. I mean, having important energy and other resources, we can help those economies grow, complement those economies. But also, of course, Venezuela has been a founding member of OPEC since many years ago. Venezuela is active, and you mentioned ALBA, and ALBA is trying to redefine also its path in order to also fight against those coercive measures, because a lot of the ALBA members, like Cuba and Nicaragua, as well as Venezuela, are also under sanctions. But it's important that we address that. But the key thing is that they have not been able to isolate us. As a matter of fact, despite all the difficulties, our relations with different countries continue to grow and continue to be very lively, and I think that has been key. I mean, it has been our protection when we were at the worst moment of the pandemic and we weren't able to import, or we weren't able to buy vaccines because our money was frozen in foreign banks. When we were able to import medicine because precisely the sanctions scared off a lot of the people from selling things to Venezuela. Well, it was the solidarity of other countries, of those other relations that Venezuela had with China, with Cuba, with India, with Russia, with Turkey, that allowed us to really, survive and move forward. So I think that has been very important.
Thank you. So there's one question in the chat that's probably difficult to answer, but it says, what is the most important technical measure that the government of Venezuela took since 2019 to bring about this recovery? Yosmer, did you want to try and tackle that one?
Sí, sí, ¿ya me escuchan?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Sí.
Yes. It's really about 5 measures that are part of the virtuous formula, the technical measures, which is what I believe you're asking. The first was to dismantle the existing exchange system in Venezuela, oil revenue coming into the government and to the treasury, all of the foreign exchange. Then there was a control system for this hard currency when it had when the oil economy collapsed. They said there's nothing to control, and they said no, we have to keep the dollar stable. We couldn't keep it stable because we could not handle the demand of foreign exchange that was coming from outside and the struggle over this. Well, we dismantled the exchange system and created a new exchange system in which the private suppliers and buyers set the prices. Since we did not manage foreign exchange and we just had very little bit for basic services like vaccines and medicines, we allowed that to play out as it was. And many people had their own savings in dollars, and they had a disaccumulation of assets in dollars. And that was the first thing that we had to dismantle it. The second one was to restrict liquidity at the banks. How did we do that? We did this through something called legal reserve. And we took all of the money out of the banks because we discovered that some banks, not all of them, were giving cheap credit for people to put pressure on the demand for the exchange rate or for dollars. That they borrowed in bolivars and then they tried to sell in dollars. But we said enough of that. We had very strict legal reserve requirements imposed on the banks so that they would not have that demand or that pressure on the dollar. And so the dollar market began to stabilize. The other thing that we did was that credit in the interest rate for credit was lagging. It was not synchronized with inflation. If the interest rate was very low and inflation was very high, so we synchronized them. We took measure, and certainly at the central bank, but of course it was approved by the national executive and in coordination with them, as we always do, so that people requesting a loan after 3 months, they would get the money. They couldn't just get the money and buy dollars and then sell it at a fraction of the rate. We eliminated that because now if I loan you $100, then over time you have to pay it in 3, 4, 6 months, but you have to pay back the $100. Another very important measure that's not here, and I'll close out with this, is that the central bank began to publish inflation rates regularly. In other words, because of problems that existed with all of these attacks we were undergoing, we began to publish, and this around 2019, 2020, this had a big impact on price setting because the central bank was establishing the path of prices in the economy. So this also was good for economic expectations for economic agents, and it injected a little bit of trust in the economy, which also allowed inflation to calm down. The other major measure, it's not so much a measure, but when we no longer were a rentier economy with all this oil revenue, they had the people who had to set the price of a pencil here. Previously, people had a lot of money would pay more for it, but if it's overpriced, speculation prices like 30 months, and since I had so much money because of all the oil revenue I was getting, and I would pay 30% more. No, since the money is scarce and it comes out of my pocket, this pencil is only going to be sold at the price that it's worth. Previously, we looked at the prices of goods and services. Now, people who offers or produce a pencil previously knew that somebody else would be willing to pay 30% more. Now, since they no longer do this, they have to sell it at regular low prices. And also their profits of the business owners were exorbitant. And the consumer also has more income, and they could afford to buy pencils when they weren't at speculation prices. So all of this is due to a much more logical price setting, and that also calmed down inflation in Venezuela. Those are the most important measures.
Thank you. I had a feeling it would be hard to come up with one only, but that's very helpful. Thank you. So before we move into the group photo kind of closing of tonight's webinar and online picket with the Venezuela Solidarity Network, I wanted to once again thank our speakers, Carlos and Ron and Yosmer Arellán. If you could, as I finish my remarks, think of a few words you might want to say in regards to the importance of solidarity from people in North America, what people in North America can do to fight these unilateral coercive measures imposed against Venezuela. That would be excellent. Following their closing remarks, we'll move into a group photo, and I'll explain how that's going to go. But I do want to be both cautious of your time and of the time of all of our organizers and interpreters, especially tonight. So we will not be able to get to all of the questions, but your questions have given us very good ideas for upcoming webinars and online pickets, the kind of topics that are going to be important to discuss. So thank you very much for submitting the questions. So closing remarks. Yosmer, would you like to go first? Anything you'd like to say in regards to what people in North America can do to fight these criminal measures?
Wow. Change government. Well, I think the first thing I want to say is I want to thank the Alliance for Global Justice, Carlos, for your invitation. Well, what can you do? Well, this sort of thing helps. Maybe a series. I'd be willing to be a part of this. We can present the book through this system, and we can show other proof and talk a little bit more about this virtuous formula, because it's not easy to talk about everything that Venezuela has done, but it should be the world should know. This is a way of breaking the unilateral coercive measures. And I thank you, because it's not just me. I think it's the second or third time that I talk internationally about what we're doing. Because they think that us Venezuelans we're looking at people that are constructing the economy in Venezuela are not academic. We don't think, we don't have all that is needed to actually construct an economy. Therefore, we're people that don't have vocabulary, we don't have experience, because we're just bad, and people underestimate us. And that's good because we're constructing something that is good for the world. It doesn't matter if they underestimate us. And today I feel very good as someone that has been living this analysis. This analysis makes me cry sometimes. It makes me very angry. But in the end, having you there, listening to us, and a lot of people support us in the world. Because listen, Bolivar was born here, Chavez was born here, we have oil reserves, we have a wonderful people, and I'm a part of this people that suffered this, and I feel I have company in you. And so really, I just want to thank you. I'm very thankful, and I'm here to help in any way to talk about what we've done. I studied economy, and I am completely available for any webinar you may want to do.
Thank you so much for that generous offer. I see that many of us are looking forward, of course, to your book when it's available, probably in Spanish first. So we'll have to work on that. But many of us will make every effort to read it and use it as a helpful resource for sure. Carlos, go ahead.
I agree with Yosmer. I think that this work that you guys do of consistently bringing out these spaces for these discussions are key. I mean, it's only going to be once people, especially in the U.S., where all this aggression starts. Once people in the U.S. really knows and understand what's going on, and that they and it gets to become a tough issue for those making the decisions. Well, I think it's really important that that it's the only way things are really going to change, because the change of policy is what is needed to have a different type of relationship with the U.S. So everything that is done by the Solidarity, every the denunciation of these aggressions, every rally like the one William and the other comrades did in support in our mission at the UN, those are hugely important things, because also it motivates us to know that, like Yosmer said, that we're not alone, that you understand our plight, and that we're all together in this, because we understand that it's also very difficult for you living in those countries with an imperialistic attitude. It's also difficult for you to be there trying to change things. So this is our common struggle, and we will all be here together in solidarity with each other to make until we all achieve the victory of living in peace and justice together.
Thank you very much, Carlos Ron. What incredible webinar, a wealth of knowledge to learn from and to use in our further work. Today has been a webinar that I know many of us will go back to again in order to make sure we have all the information, and as we've said, arm ourselves for our future work. Thank you again to everyone that has been helping to build and organize the Venezuela Solidarity Network, which is now taking on these monthly webinars and online pickets, to the Alliance for Global Justice for hosting today and all the efforts and work that went into that. We've had a very smooth webinar so far, and are now moving into the section of the webinar where folks will be invited to join us in the panelist space. If you'd like to turn on your camera, you will get an invitation asking if you'd like to be a panelist, and if you wouldn't mind and you'd like to turn on your camera and join the group photo. I think this will work. The setup is a little different than the last few months, so I think it's going to work out here. If you can't turn on your camera yet, we might just have to change a setting that allows folks to do so. I haven't sent all the invitations yet, but as I continue to do so, I will say as well that you are all invited to join the next of the online pickets and monthly webinars of the Venezuela Solidarity Network. That will be on Tuesday, July 23rd, and will be hosted this time by the Sanctions Kill campaign, which I encourage also folks to get involved with and to find out more about. If you would like to join the photo and you have not received an invitation, please raise your hand and I will try and get one to you as soon as possible. That's the way I like it. So you will get a notification will pop up on your screen that will say, would you like to rejoin the webinar as a panelist? You do have to agree in order to be able to be part of the group photo. And if we go ahead and also, I'll change my view, but I don't think that will change everyone's view. We can change ourselves to a gallery view, then we can start to see each other. There's just a few kinks to work out here. But I think, folks, your camera won't automatically go on, but I do believe you will be able to turn it on. Just a few hands. Basically, the idea is that we would like to have all been with William Kamikaro and his co-fighters in New York yesterday, delivering those letters. We'd like to be at a protest united in front of the White House, in solidarity with Venezuela, but that's not always possible. So can we create this online space where we can see each other each month, we can learn from one another, and part of that is this group photo. Oh, here we are. So I've seen all your great faces, your struggling faces joining. Again, if you haven't gotten an invitation to join us in the panelist space, please raise your hand and I will send it. Some folks who've been part of the monthly pickets for the last 3 years are used to the drill. Others, this is new. Thanks to the Alliance for Global Justice tech team for dealing with this and helping get this looking good, but everyone's looking great. We'll give it one more minute. I know there's still some folks raising their hands here. Again, welcome. We have been joined here from people I've seen in the chat across North America, really covering all parts of Canada, Quebec, the United States. Thank you all. Okay. Anyone has not received the invitation but would like to join our group photo, please do raise your hand. Okay. I'm seeing everyone slowly join. Takes a bit of time. But we'll also be able to chant together again, like we are in front of the White House, like we are gathered together. I won't, of course, hesitate to give a second, third, fourth, fifth big thank you to our interpreters. It's very important to us that these webinars are bilingual, but it is a difficult job to do simultaneous interpretation, especially on economy. So I will say thank you again to all the interpreters. I think everyone that wanted to join our photo is now here. You should be able to turn on your cameras. Let's say it loud and clear. Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Echo. Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Venceremos.
Venceremos.
Thank you again, everyone.
Hands off Venezuela.
Yeah, there we go.
Hands
Get
off
involved in the
Venezuela.
Venezuela Solidarity Network. The information is in the chat. You'll be able to share and send this
Gracias.
video around. Un abrazo fuerte, a big hug to Yosmer Arellán and to Carlos.
Can I make a quick statement?
Gracias.
Excellent
Gracias.
speakers. We
Gracias.
look forward to our continued struggle together. Venceremos, we will win.
Can I make
We
a quick
will
statement?
Baby.
Can I make a quick statement, please? I know, no, I hate to brag, but I know if I'm gonna run for office one day, and when I do, I'm gonna help the people of Venezuela. It's one of my duties. because
Thank
you're
you.
right. We should
Qué
be
bueno.
we should be we should respect the will of the people, not to enforce it.
Victory to the will of the people. We will win. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Gracias. Buenas noches. Gracias.
Buenas noches. Nos vemos.
Good evening.